What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
Guys, today we are talking about Islam Makhachev's 3 keys to victory as he looks to defend his belt and defeat Arman Tsarukyan in their rematch. And Nick, I think we should get right into what we determined to be his number 1 key to victory.
Let's do it.
Arman Tsarukyan's very explosive. So I think Islam really needs to try to get him to overcommit with the striking and then exploit that. And he can exploit it in one of 2 ways. He can exploit it with beautiful counter striking that he's really shown a high level of improvement in over the last couple of fights.
Right.
Or he can do what he does best, which he's almost like a matador in that sense. I know that's Ilia Toporia's fight name, but Islam Makhachev is almost a matador when it comes to off-balancing, tripping, and bringing his opponent's energy to use it to his advantage and get them to the ground.
Right.
So if he can force Arman Tsarukyan to overcommit on some striking, Arman is going to be shorter. He's going to be looking to land those bigger shots. He likes to throw overhands. He likes to feint with his jab a lot. If Islam can rope him in, he can cause him to be off balance, which will make his takedowns a bit easier, and it will set up a good opportunity for some counter strikes. So what are your thoughts on that point?
That's a great point. And I think Arman Tsarukyan, being that he's a powerful striker and he loves to come in and chain his punching in with his grappling, that is a great game plan for Islam Makhachev to try to exploit Arman in. And what I see happening is Arman's obviously going to throw the standard double jab with some feints in there, and then every now and again an overhand's going to come over the side. But what happens when you're doing that and you're a wrestler is you're showing the takedown entry. And when you're fighting a guy like Islam Makhachev, who is not afraid of your takedown entry, he's not afraid. If you try to take him down, he doesn't think that you can. But even if you do, he's still not worried about it, even if he has to get back up to the canvas. But I think that Islam Makhachev, forcing Arman Tsarukyan to come in a little bit brazen and look for those long strikes, he's going to have the disadvantage. So he is going to have to lunge a little bit. He is going to have to make up a little bit of distance on Islam when he does enter. And the counter striking, the long counter punches off of Islam are really, really nice these days. The way he's able to improve in his striking is really insane. You usually, when you have such a dominant skill on the ground against everybody else, you can kind of just take the fight down there and just do what you want and win your fights all with that certain skill set. But he's actually improving on his striking and is now a finisher with his striking just as much as he is a finisher with his submissions. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and he's finishing great strikers too, like Volkanovski, for example, in the second fight. Islam was a guy in the beginning of his career. What was the main complaint? He wasn't a great finisher. He had great control. He would beat you in a decision. The decision would be very lopsided, but people didn't enjoy a lot of those fights, a lot of the casual fans, because he had a very methodical way to win, and it was usually involving the judges' scorecards. But now he's very much a finisher, and it's not just submissions, it's strikes too. And so I think Islam is going to look for some real striking opportunities to exploit Arman, and if he can get Arman to rush in by baiting him a little bit, he can start to have a real advantage in the striking department, which will ultimately lead to his signature trips and takedowns.
Yeah, and I don't think he'll try to force anything. I think he'll let Arman try to bring the fight to him, and Arman's going to put that pressure on him. But like you said, he's so comfortable with just staying long with the strikes, and if he's able to disrupt Arman's entries with punches and maybe some hooks and just jabs to keep the shorter fighter at bay, Arman's going to look to abandon the punches and the strikes over the top, and he's going to look to implement some of that grappling and just kind of forego the jabs and the crosses. He'll just use those as a means to an end. But that gets a little bit risky when you fight a guy like Islam. We've seen Islam throw some very crafty, very calculated, and well-timed knees right up the middle. And when you've got a wrestler who's shorter and he needs to get inside, and Arman's style isn't like Islam's, where he likes to get the body lock and look for trip variations. He likes to bite down on his mouthpiece, change levels, and shoot through you, and basically put you into the put you into the cage, and then drag you down to the floor. So Arman's game plan to get the fight to the ground does involve him being a little bit explosive, and I think the counters, the Matador style approach to the defense of Arman's wrestling is what Islam's going to definitely look to do in that range of the fight until we see what happens next.
Yeah, and so that brings me to my second point. We mentioned Islam mixing it up with the best of them in striking now, which has been a real improvement in his career. Considering the fact that Arman is a shorter body type, he does like to get himself low to level change sometimes.
Right.
Point number 2 is Islam Makhachev needs to set up that high head kick. And I think he can do that by landing some really good body kicks.
Yeah.
These guys are going to be in opposite stances for most of the fight.
Right.
When we did the Arman breakdown, we talked about opposite stance and how that could play into the fold here. But for Islam, from Islam's point of view, he's got the liver on the side where his kicks would be going, his power kicks. So what do you need to do? What did he do correctly when he was able to get Volkanovski out there with a head kick? He set it up with the body kick.
Right.
He started landing really devastating, really good body kicks, and even if it was subconsciously and Volk didn't realize it, his hands dropped ever so slightly, and that little bit of real estate that Islam was able to steal from Volkanovski in his guard, he was able to exploit with a head kick. Now, Arman's a little bit different body type than Volkanovski, but height-wise, he's only a touch taller. So I think that exact same technique and that exact same tactic can garner Islam some success here. So I think what he needs to do is look for that jab body kick variation, so maybe a 1-2 body kick or even just a jab body kick to see if he can get that hand of Arman down ever so slightly, and then he needs to send one up top, because if you really want to change the tide of the fight in 1 second, it's to land a massive head kick like he did against Volkanovski. Maybe that won't finish Arman. Maybe Arman will be a little bit more durable. We know Volkanovski was coming off the couch for that fight. He didn't look like Volkanovski from a physical perspective, when given the proper amount of time to train. So Arman, I expect to be able to eat a head kick or two, but boy, oh boy, can that really change how things go and shift the direction and the momentum of the fight and allow other opportunities to open up for Islam. So setting up that head kick to me is a really key point for Makhachev.
Oh yeah, that's a brilliant setup. And when you're fighting an orthodox fighter, generally they see less southpaws than you see orthodox. So you can just sort of assume that you have these certain notions ingrained in their mind and they can't change certain things. When you're fighting somebody orthodox and you're a southpaw fighter, everything is backwards. So everything that you're used to doing really does need to be tinkered with, and you have to modify what you're doing. And Islam Makhachev really does have it down as far as MMA goes. Just like we said in the last video, Lomachenko has the angles and all of that down perfectly for boxing. Islam Makhachev really has a good understanding of striking and staying long and using angles in MMA. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how he does implement that. And I like that you said that whether it was subconscious or not, Volkanovski's hand was dropping. What was beautiful about that whole situation, and you got to give this combination, that whole fight, props when Islam Makhachev went out there and fought Volk for the second time. So Volkanovski was the smaller fighter, and he's got pretty big arms. So he's pretty good at staying guarded all the way from basically his forehead down to almost his waist. Like, he's got good arms for that. But there is a little bit of space. And Islam Makhachev's kicks to the body, that liver kick that we're talking about he wants to throw on Arman, it was going literally on the waistline, on the belt line, 1 inch above it. He was just putting it there simply for placement to make sure Volkanovski's hand dropped just slightly. And that's exactly what it did. Volkanovski is a buttoned up fighter. He didn't make a huge mistake. He went from keeping his hand here to keeping it here, just so he could keep that side of his body a little bit safer. And this 2 inches is all Islam Makhachev needed on the top of Volk's head to get the fight over with. And so that fight, that sort of kick with that sort of power can shut the lights out on Arman. And the fact that he's a little bit smaller, it does raise some awareness to me, because I think Islam Makhachev can look for that exact same finish, and the fact that Islam Makhachev isn't afraid of the takedown, so he will throw the kick with 100% power and looking to do a lot of damage with it. Oftentimes when you see guys that are kicking a grappler, they won't put everything behind it because they're more focused on the retraction, and they're more focused on getting their foot back so they can get back to base and stay on their feet. Islam Makhachev's not really worried about that. So I think these body kicks and these low kicks that he's going to use to set up the high kicks are going to be devastating. And if Arman's not careful to watch out for him, I think if he doesn't block him, he can wind up unconscious just like Volkanovski.
Yeah, solid points. And it wouldn't be a video about Islam Makhachev if we didn't talk about some grappling, right?
That's right.
We're talking about his keys to victory, and so far it's been a striking-based video. But I think that speaks to where his improvements have been over the last couple of years. But we do have to talk about what he's got to do to grapple effectively against Arman Tsarukyan, who's incredible with the scrambles. And I think that is to utilize the half guard to staple Arman to the canvas and keep him there. You know, Islam's really good with working towards the submission. He'll be in your guard, he'll get to half guard, he'll pass, he'll get into either mount. If you turn your back, he'll rear naked choke you, or he'll work his way up to getting that head and arm triangle. That's kind of how he operates when it comes to his ground offensive, especially with the submissions. But with Arman, it's not going to be that easy. Arman's built like a ball of muscle, right? And he's going to be able to scramble really well. He's a very good wrestler. So Islam can't rush the forward progress as far as making the moves on the ground to work towards that submission.
Right.
And I think he needs to hang out in the half guard, because the half guard, while it's a position that it's very hard to finish somebody from a submission when you're in their half guard, it's a lot easier to keep them to the ground, which is where Islam can do a lot of that signature ground and pound that he utilizes. So I think rounds 1 through 3, when Islam gets it to the ground, if he gets it to the ground, he shouldn't be in any hurry. He should sit in the half guard position, work elbows, work punches, start to bring Arman's will and gas tank down a little bit. And then in those later rounds, because when you have a guy who's like a ball of muscle, like I said, and he's got these great scrambles and he's got this ability to just get out of things, he is going to be a lot more tired come rounds 4 and 5 if you can do that effectively in the first 3 rounds, which brings the ability to create those athletic movements that allow him to burst out of a position, scramble out of position, and maybe do some offensive wrestling of his own. It's going to be more difficult. He's going to have to dig deeper in the tank to do that. And so I think Islam really needs to do damage from the half guard position, maintain position, and start to put deposits in the bank of draining Arman's gas tank.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Islam Makhachev is so good at getting to a dominant position, but he doesn't need the most dominant position, you know, flattened out on the back or you know, body triangle. He doesn't have to have that to finish the fight. He can finish with ground and pound. He can even find submissions from places like half guard. And when you talk about jiu-jitsu, half guard is never anything anybody would celebrate in jiu-jitsu, because it's kind of just like a
neutral position.
It's like a bridge between guard and side mount or mount if you want. But it's very interesting when you think about the position over submission, because Islam Makhachev will sit there in that half guard, and it's become like a prestigious premier location for a grappler to be in MMA. And the main reason for that is these guys like Arman are so good at scrambling. They're so good at, you know, unstapling themselves to the ground and getting back up and forcing you to fight and use your energy to keep them on the ground. So I find that the half guard is so important, because you're pinning one of your opponent's hips down, and then with the top of your body, you're pinning their other side shoulder down. And when you've got one side of their hip and one side of their shoulder pinned to the ground, they really can't do much with the other side. That is the most dominant place you can be when you want to just keep somebody flat on the ground. That's better than being in mount position. Because
just as far as keeping somebody down, you're saying.
Right, as far as keeping somebody down. And when you have somebody like Arman, who, like we're saying, he's going to scramble. And it's more... It's not just the body type and everything that Arman brings into the cage. It's the mental side. We're dealing with a wrestler. And when you're talking about wrestling and you're talking about grappling arts, it really is this like hierarchy of who is the better, who is the premier grappler, is jiu-jitsu or wrestling or judo, whatever it is. Okay, but now there's subcategories to that. What's the best type of wrestling? Is it Greco-Roman? Is it freestyle? Or the Dagestani's doing something different? So I feel like Arman Tsarukyan, the man inside of him, is not going to be okay with getting taken down by Islam, and that's why you're going to see him go crazy when he does get taken down, and that's where the importance of Islam's position over submission is going to come in tenfold, because if he can zap Arman and keep him on the ground after this flurry and attempt to try to get up, that can zap Arman's gas tank, and that can lead to a more dominant position over a half guard or something like that for Islam, and then he can look for his finishes that way. But yeah, I think this is really interesting, and if these two fighters come out and do everything that we think they could have improved on their first fight, I think we have one of the most exciting, high-level, entertaining fights of the year. And it's so funny because it's going to be the first pay-per-view of the year, but it's going to be a hard one for the rest of the cards to compete with.
We're starting off with a bang. Guys, thanks so much for watching this video. If you want to see the flip side of this conversation and what the 3 keys to victory for Arman Tsarukyan are, click right here. This video is going to give you all the information for what Arman Tsarukyan could possibly do to win. And then make sure you hit that subscribe and bell notification button, because the week of the fight, Nick and I will be giving our actual final prediction for Makhachev versus Tsarukyan 2, as well as many other fights on that great card. We'll see you next time.
Peace.